Hi there, my name is Cassie Black, and I want to thank you for joining the next edition of our KB Fireside Chat. Today's topic is addressing social emotional needs when we go back to school this fall. We'll talk about addressing the needs of students, staff, families, and yourselves as well. For those of you who don't know me, I'm an associate here at Kriya, but prior to that, I was an educator. I was a school psychologist, an assistant principal, a director of special education, and an assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction. And in all of these roles, I've always recognized the importance of social emotional learning. And while this has always been important, it's extremely important today. We're in the middle of a global pandemic, and this has impacted all of us differently. Some people have experienced financial crises, illness, death of loved ones, change in routine, feelings of isolation, inability to celebrate milestone events, and these are just some of the ways in which people have been impacted. Additionally, over the summer, we've seen nationwide mobilization against police violence and systemic racism, and these are also things that have impacted all of us in one way or another. So, like I said, SEL is not something that we need to think about just for students, but really for all stakeholders, for families, for staff, for administrators, for everybody that's involved in our school community. And so that's going to be the focus of what we talk about today. As we talk about this today, I'll mention some resources and some ideas, but please know that there are a lot of great resources and ideas out there. I know this actually from the conversations that I'm having with many of you, as well as by looking at the things that I see posted on Twitter and other places. You guys have a lot of great ideas. And so today, my intention is really to talk about some things that you want to start thinking about, talk about some ideas, but really just to get the conversation started. And I want to keep you guys really sharing ideas with each other because you have so many great ideas to share. Also, social emotional learning is a complex topic that can't necessarily be addressed in a quick fireside chat. But again, the purpose is to just get some ideas rolling and get you thinking about this and sharing ideas with each other. When we talk about social emotional learning, I know that it can seem overwhelming. I've talked with many administrators who recognize the importance of addressing social emotional learning, but also recognize some limitations. So a district may not have a social emotional curriculum, or they may not have staff trained in addressing social emotional needs of staff, or feel like they have enough social workers or psychologists or other mental health professionals, or have very limited time. And I know from my time as an educator, these are very real concerns, but the things that we're going to talk about today don't require specific curricular materials, don't require a lot of training, don't require specialized personnel or a lot of time. But what they do require are purposeful efforts, really focusing on communication, relationship building, and promotion of healthy habits. And so these are the things that we're going to talk about today. I think it's also important to remember that you don't have to have all the answers. And so again, that's why I want to encourage you to collaborate with each other, but I also want to encourage you to seek information from the stakeholders that we talk about today. So get information from families, from students, from staff about what their needs are. This can be done in a variety of ways. It might be through surveys or focus groups or small group or individual conversations. It's important to recognize the pandemic really has impacted everybody differently. And so needs will be different. But I think one thing that probably we can say that everybody wants is an opportunity to feel heard, and they want to feel like they're cared about. And so I think we can do this by increasing conversation and opportunities for that feedback and for two-way conversations, but also thinking about ways to really show that somebody is cared about. And so those are the things we'll talk about today. A resource I do want to mention is one that I saw the other day that I think might be a good practical resource for schools. So the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, or CASEL, is probably a resource that many of you are familiar with already. And they recently released a roadmap to reopening schools and focusing on the social emotional needs of all the stakeholders that we're going to talk about today. And they have a lot of really good essential questions to ask, resources and tools that districts can use to identify their needs, really develop a plan for addressing those needs using existing structures and supports and kind of building on those. And so if you haven't checked it out, I think it might be one worth mentioning. Again, there's lots of great resources, but this just caught my eye as one that's very practical and wanted to make sure that you knew that it was out there. So let's dive in and start talking about different stakeholders. So let's first talk about families. I know that many districts are seeking family input through surveys, through focus groups, and through that two-way communication. And so I think this is really important in order to identify needs, but also it's important to communicate information about what the upcoming year will look like. I've seen districts do a lot of great things, and so it might be through letters or through posting information on the website. I'm seeing quite a few districts that have developed videos that outline what the year is going to look like, how classrooms are going to be structured, how the hallways are going to be addressed, the safety measures that are in place, if online learning is an option, what that's going to look like. And I think this is really important in helping families understand what the upcoming school year will look like. Communication is always important, but during these times, I think we probably can't communicate enough. So it's really important to keep that going. I would also encourage you to seek information about individual family and student needs. So this might help you identify what those needs are and figuring out how those needs can be addressed, whether it's through school-based supports or referrals to community agencies, but also might help you figure out, are there needs that are consistent across families so that you can figure out ways to more efficiently address those needs. I've also seen some districts really work to find some purposeful time and space to address some of these family needs. And so districts probably have a lot of existing groups already. So you might have your bilingual parent advisory committee, or your a group for parents of students with disabilities, your PTA, PTO, or other community engagement groups. And maybe the focus of those groups will look a little bit different this year, depending on the needs of those particular groups. And so it'll be important to work with the parents that kind of lead and facilitate those groups with you to identify those needs and then figure out how you can use that time and space to address those particular needs that are consistent across families. If instruction is going to be remote this year, I think one of the things I've seen a lot of districts talk about is the need to increase some training for parents about what those online learning platforms will look like so that parents can better support their children at home. So that's certainly something to think about if learning will be remote this year. I also know districts have other structures in place. Many districts do book clubs with families or have parent evening speakers, and this is also an existing structure that might be a way to focus on unique needs that have been brought on by the pandemic. And so looking at, maybe are there book club topics or speakers that are extremely pressing and relevant this year based on the needs of your community, and using some of those structures to address those needs. I've said this already, but I just want to say again that it's important to collaborate with other districts. I was talking to an administrator the other day who mentioned that she got together with psychologists, social workers, and administrators across multiple districts. She's in a K-8 district and worked with other surrounding districts to look at what are some of the needs that are being identified. How are districts going to address that? Are there ways that across multiple districts they can be working together to address those needs? And if not, are there at least ideas that can be shared to figure out how to address the needs within the community? And so I highly encourage you to work with some of your surrounding districts. If you're an elementary district, maybe consider working with your high school district. If you're, a district that, is right next to another school district, figure out ways that you can collaboratively work together, share resources. Maybe there's things that you can do that'll be a little bit more effective and efficient to address the entire needs of the community. But I highly do encourage you to work together. So let's next talk about students. I know that schools are already doing many, many things to support the social emotional needs of students. And so you want to keep doing what you're doing. We want to focus on building and providing a safe, supporting learning environment for all students, and really focus on relationship building. Prior to the start of the year, it will be important to let students know what to expect. And so this can be done through the videos that we've already talked about with families. I've seen districts send pictures, newsletters, information online, but really focusing on what the classroom's going to look like, what the hallways are going to look like. School's going to look different. If it's online, what that's going to look like, what they can expect in terms of, will they go to specials classes, or will specials teachers come to them? Will they be able to participate in after-school clubs and activities? Many of the ways we've already talked about will be great for communicating that information for students with more significant needs, or for younger students, maybe you want to look at providing social stories. I've seen some teachers talk about sending individual notes or phone calls, welcoming students to the beginning of the year. And so these are all great ideas, but I think the focus is really on making sure that students know what to expect when they walk in the door or when they start the year online. Once students do start, we want to focus on relationship building. And again, this really can be done through some of the existing supports that you have in place. I know that many schools probably have class meeting time, homeroom, advisory, and that's already used for relationship building, getting to know you at the beginning of the year. And while this will be important, I think at the beginning of the year, it's also going to be important to sustain this throughout the year. Because there's just some unique factors, and especially if school is online, need to make sure that that's in place. And so I've heard districts really focus on, again, getting to know you activities, relationship building, collaborative problem solving. I've seen districts talk about doing like escape room type problem solving activities. And I think those are things that can be done in small groups, whether it's in person or online. I think there's actually quite a lot of resources online for providing those types of problem solving activities. I've also seen teachers, especially if it's online, work to figure out ways to allow some of that conversation, even if it's informal social conversation, because that's really important. I teach a grad school class, and so last year our class started in person, and then we moved to online learning throughout the year. And one of the things that I noticed that was glaringly missing was just the opportunity for informal socialization. So, students talking with each other before class or after class, talking about what they did on the weekend, talking about homework assignments, talking about just funny things that happened. And when we were online, that wasn't really happening, and it was difficult to do with a group of 30. And so I started to start every single class period with a warm-up activity. There was usually a review of something we had done the class before, but I would also ask some sort of non-threatening conversation starter that I also hoped would lead into just informal conversation about the weekend and about things that they were doing, to try to replicate just those less formal opportunities for conversation, because I think that's important for all of us to have some of that in our daily lives. And so those are some things that teachers might want to think about if instruction is done online. So in addition to relationship building, I think it's also important to really focus on routines and structures and expectations. So even if students are going back to school, it's going to look different than what they're used to. It's also been a long time since students have been in school. If learning is going to be online, that's going to also look different than I imagine what learning looked like online in the spring. So it's going to be important to really teach students, explicitly teach what those routines are, what those expectations are, and probably do that a little more often than we're used to doing that, or needing to do that at the beginning of each school year. Other ideas just in general for building relationships that I've seen some schools talk about is making sure there's time for celebrations, recognizing birthdays and special days, having theme days. So even if you're online, maybe today's a day that we, all wear our favorite sports jerseys, or it's pajama day or whatever, so that there's a way that students are connecting and it kind of brings them close together. Teachers may also want to start class sessions with inspirational quotes or poems, maybe starting with music, something to kind of get people together and having fun. So these are just a couple of ideas. And again, you guys have so many great ideas. I hope you'll share with each other. But the focus really should be on establishing community and relationships early and often throughout the school year when we're talking about students' social emotional needs. So now let's talk about staff. I know that a lot of staff are very anxious about what the upcoming year will bring, what that will look like, what safety measures are in place. And I think there's a lot of anxiety. I think this is a really important time to make sure that we are communicating with staff, and again, allowing for that two-way communication. So seeking feedback from staff, sharing planning process with them, sharing draft ideas, letting them know that all of the things that they're anxious about are things that are being planned for and accounted for, including representative staff members in that planning process. It's important to make sure that we're really including representatives from all staff stakeholders. So getting input from teachers, related service providers, paraprofessionals, custodial staff, administrative assistants, making sure that really all stakeholders are accounted for, and that, again, focusing on that voice and agency and knowing that that they're being cared for. That applies for families, that applies for students, that applies for staff. So making sure that that communication really is in place. Additionally, at the beginning of the year, it'll be important to focus on community building, staff morale, and recognizing some of that anxiety. I think many of the things that we talked about with students are things that you can do with staff. So again, focusing on purposeful team building activities, using some of your staff, your professional development or staff meeting time to focus on again, relationships, team building activities. A lot of the things we talked about with students will apply, having theme days, building in a little bit of time for communication, social interaction, less structured conversations, maybe bringing some of their concerns to the forefront and having a structured opportunity to talk through some of those ideas. Self-care is also really important. Pre-pandemic, I saw districts start to focus on this with staff, and sometimes in professional development days, holding some sessions that might focus on mindfulness or yoga. Teaching is a really stressful profession, and so it's important for staff members to have those self-care skills and find time for those self-care skills. And so maybe reminders of that or some brief teaching of some strategies might be really important this year. And that can be something that you do at the beginning of a staff meeting. If you join our KB Friday fireside chats, you know that we always start our calls with deep breathing. And so that might be something that you do with staff members at the beginning of every staff meeting as well, to encourage people to just take a moment and engage in some of that deep breathing. I think there's a lot of great ideas, again, that I'm seeing you guys do. And the key is really to focus on relationship building, focus on morale, focus on communication, and making sure that everybody does feel connected and a part of that process. It's also important to remember that each staff member really is experiencing the pandemic in different ways. And a good resource that districts do have available for staff members is the Employee Assistance Program. And so it might be important to remind staff that this is a resource that is available to them to help them cope with all of the complexities and stressful situations that are going on right now. And lastly, let's talk about self-care. I know that educators are really anxious right now about wanting to know what the year will look like, what the fall will look like. Many schools are reopening in just a couple of weeks, and many of you are the ones that are in the trenches trying to figure out what that planning process will look like. And this is constantly evolving and changing day to day, and this is really stressful. So it's important for you to make sure that you are also stopping and engaging in some of the self-care practices that we just talked about for staff. One of my administrator friends recently reminded me of the importance of doing something kind for yourself. And so this is doing something that you enjoy. This might be running or reading or playing outdoors with your kids, or grabbing a cup of coffee with a friend. But it's important to find this time and to incorporate it into your daily practice. I know that this is particularly hard, especially when you know, there's so many things that need to get done, and they all need to get done now. But when we do things that help us relax and help us think and just work more efficiently, effectively, this will help us both in our personal and our professional life, and it'll help us be more effective in trying to make some of those decisions. And so I encourage you to you know, be kind to yourself and find something that you enjoy doing every single day. I also know that it may feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders right now as you're trying to figure out how to reopen this fall and what that needs to look like. But it's important to remember that you're not alone. This is new for everybody, and nobody has all the answers. We're all trying to figure it out together. And so it's important to reach out to others. It's important to reach out to others to collaborate and share ideas. It's also important to reach out to others to laugh about how this wasn't a part of your administrator training program, to cry on somebody's shoulder, or to just remind yourself that you're not alone. It's also important to reach out to others so that they know that they're not alone. In closing, I want to say that addressing social emotional needs of students, staff, families, administrators, all stakeholders is really complex. And again, the purpose today was just to get the conversation going, get you thinking about some ideas, but really to share ideas with each other. I am so inspired every day by the conversations that I have with you and the ideas that I see being shared out there. And so I really want to tell you how grateful I am to work with such dedicated and inspiring and creative and hardworking educators that are out there. While I'm not on the front lines anymore, I have never been more proud to call myself an educator, and am just so grateful to be a part of this journey with you guys. And I know that together we've got this.